Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Chet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. I'm trying to put on a brave face, Sap, trying to put on, a smile as much as I can. But the Celtics really ripped my heart out last night as they dropped a game that they had no business dropping, blew a game, I should say, losing 107 to 110. Now they're down 3-2. Headed to Milwaukee on Friday for what could be their last game of the season. Celtics were winning this thing the whole way through. And I'm not going to be Jermaine Wiggins and not show up and do this thing today like you said he did when the Patriots lost. I'm going to do my job here and talk about it. But, man, was that a punch in the gut, testicles, whatever punch you want to call it? That's how I'm feeling today.
It certainly was a punch. How much did you sleep last night?
Not well, tossing and turning,
You probably got less sleep than Ime Udoka or any of the players because I know how much
I take
you
it
love
personally. Yeah,
You do. And I'm more of a neutral observer. And, for the first 38 minutes, Jet, they played outstanding basketball. They have a 93-79 lead with 10-16 remaining. From that point forward, they're outscored 31-14. On the offensive end, too much isolation. In the entire fourth quarter, they didn't attempt one three-pointer, this is a team that's not afraid of taking three-pointers. They didn't take one in the fourth quarter. And it felt to me like they were just trying to milk the clock. It felt like I was watching a football game where someone had a 10-point lead and they were just trying to trim as much time off the clock as possible. Well, you can't do that in the NBA. You got to keep playing. You saw what they did in game 4 when they just kept going and going and going in the fourth quarter. Well, they took their foot off the gas in game 5 last night, and they paid for it. And then on the other end, defensively, they gave up 7 offensive rebounds in the fourth quarter alone to Milwaukee, and Milwaukee was 6 of 6 from 3. So you put that all into a blender, and you come up with a loss that was gut-punching. But the other thing, too, is they still had a 6-point lead with a little over 2 minutes left after the Al Horford dunk on the follow-up, right? So at that point, 2 minutes left, Horford gets the crowd involved with that follow-up dunk. At that point, you feel like, okay, they're going to hold on here, and it's going to be 3-2 Celtics going back to Milwaukee. From that point forward, they get outscored 11-2, and here we are now just scratching our heads wondering what the hell happened.
Yeah, it was embarrassment to lose that game, Sap, to have, a lead late in the game, to have a big lead late and then have, enough of a lead where it's really late in the game. The Celtics have absolutely no excuses. I don't want to hear about Rob Williams missed the game or anything like that. This was 100% on them. Mm-hmm. I don't think it was anything that Milwaukee did that was particularly special. The Celtics just shot themselves in the foot repeatedly to end this game. And it was the Celtics that we saw for the first half of the year creeping back in at the worst possible time, where you saw, like you mentioned, Sap, a lot of ISO ball, bad decision-making, turnovers. Marcus Smart reverted back to the Marcus Smart we saw in November and December, making some really terrible plays and decisions down the stretch. Jason Tatum didn't look good at all. Al Horford looked gassed towards the end of the game. Other than that dunk, Grant Williams was terrible. It was the bad Celtics that I think everybody was feared could make an appearance in the postseason, and they did at the most inopportune time. And my concern now is, Sap, I've watched basketball for a long time, and I'd say I've switched from, I was more of an optimist with the Celtics. I think in my younger days, I know I'm still relatively young, but I think I've become more of a pessimist. But I've watched enough where losing a game like that, that's really hard to come back from. And now having to go into Milwaukee, I don't see realistically that the Celtics will be able to win 2 straight against Milwaukee and pull this off. I think because of the way they lost the game last night, I don't see that I don't think they have it in them to be able to take out this Milwaukee team twice.
You're going to have to win these games comfortably, because if it comes down to the stretch, and we saw this in game 3 in Milwaukee when they had an opportunity to steal one, and then last night in game 5 when they should have won, that if it comes down the stretch, that Milwaukee has the best player in the world in Giannis, and they also have other guys who will step up, whether it's Drew Holiday, who has shot awfully in this postseason, in this series. Heck, he's 40 for 116 in the series, but he hit some big shots last night, right? And Bobby Portis struggled from the floor last night. but he came up with big plays and also gave you 15 rebounds. And Mike Budenholzer can thank me for suggesting that he plays more Bobby Portis and less of George Hill and Brook Lopez, because Portis was arguably, I would say conservatively, the third best Buck last night by Giannis and Drew Holiday.
Yeah.
So if it's a close game, you feel more comfortable with Milwaukee. They're the champions. They kind of have that in their DNA now, where the Celtics are still trying to find that. Game 2 was a blowout. The Celtics were hitting all their shots. It was an easy win. Game 4, they played a near perfect fourth quarter, and they ran away with it. But the other 2 of the 3 games they lost were close, and they just couldn't find a way to win. I wouldn't give up hope, because I think the Celtics can still go win in Milwaukee. Then you come back here for Game 7. And at that point, I wouldn't discount the Milwaukee Bucks winning Game 7 at TD Garden. We've seen in 2 of the series so far with Phoenix and Dallas, it's been dominated by the home team. We've seen the same thing, Miami and Philadelphia. Here we are 5 games into this series, and the road team has won 3 games. It wouldn't shock me if the Celtics won Game 6 in Milwaukee, come back home for Game 7 on Sunday, and that's flip of coin because, again, Milwaukee has the best player in the NBA in Giannis, and the Celtics still kind of have trouble closing games. Let's not forget this entire year. They were 5-15 in games decided by 5 fewer points. Well, so far in the series, they're 0-2 in games decided by 5 or fewer points. They still don't know how to close games, and they should be better at that, because I know Jason Tatum's in his 5th year. Jaylen Brown's in his 6th year. Marcus Smart's in his 8th year. It's time to stop using the excuse, well, they're a young team. Al Horford's in his 15th year. They shouldn't have this much difficulty closing games. The other thing I'm going to look at, though, is in the fourth quarter, Ime Udoka decided to go small, which they did in the fourth quarter, Game 4, with taking Grant Williams, putting him on the bench where he belonged. He had 32 minutes played last night. He had no points, 2 rebounds, and 1 assist.
He's awful.
He was horrible. And again, the insistent complaining about referees is just wearing thin. I mean, I'll on a sidebar, if you're a neutral observer, the Celtics are not a likable team. All they do is bitch and moan about the officials' calls, whether it's Tatum or Grant Williams or Daniel Tice, of all people, who actually had a good game last night, scored 11 points in 11 minutes. Okay, Tatum, we kind of put up with it because he's a superstar or near superstar. But Daniel Tice and Grant Williams, you're not going to get any favorable calls. You're role players. So I don't think they're a very likable team in that sense, where Milwaukee kind of just goes along and plays. And look, Giannis had 4 fouls called against him in the fourth quarter last night. They called the 3 seconds call against Giannis, an offensive foul. So let's hold off on that. He's getting every single call. They even call it traveling on Giannis. But when you go small with Derek White replacing Grant Williams, you have to play with more force on offense. You can't all of a sudden try to milk the clock, because on the other end, you're going to lose the battle on the board. You're smaller. And we saw Milwaukee take advantage of that.
They got it was, what was the rebound? 49-36 differential in rebounding. Horrible.
Milwaukee had 17 offensive boards in the game. You had 5. And Milwaukee had 7 offensive boards in the fourth quarter. If they weren't hitting a 3, if they were missing a shot, they were getting the rebound and kicking it back out for 3. All the big baskets at the end came after a miss, right? I mean,
right. And that's not just size, Sap. That's effort at the end of the game, too.
Right. I mean, Horford's gassed, right? Tatum's got to do a better job of rebounding. He's an elite player. There's times where, let me get on the defensive end and I'm going to get this ball. I mean, he's good enough to do that. Your guards have to drop a little bit and be more aggressive. So yeah, that's an effort thing. And again, you're asking Al Horford to play the same amount of minutes as Giannis. That's a lot to ask for a guy who's going to be 36. Giannis is right in his prime and is probably the best conditioned player in the league, if not one of the top 3. So yeah, there was a lot that went into this. But Jet, if they had just taken care of business early in the fourth quarter, we wouldn't be breaking down Giannis hitting a 3 to cut it to 3 and Drew Holiday hitting a 3 to tie it up. And then, oh, by the way, you can't retrieve a missed free throw attempt by Giannis, which to me, if you don't rebound a missed free throw attempt by the opposition, it's the same thing in football of not recovering an onside kick. And I know that well, because the Green Bay Packers lost the NFC Championship game in 2014 because they couldn't recover an onside kick. If they had, it would have been Packers-Patriots in that Super Bowl instead of Patriots-Seahawks. And I'm still in therapy because of that.
Yeah, so, it wasn't the only time that they missed a box out on a free throw earlier in the game. They missed a box out a free throw and they hit a 3 on it. I mean, it's embarrassing. That should never happen. Like you said, it is the equivalent of not being able to recover an onside kick. It's the percentages are that low, and the Celtics just could not do it to save their lives. It had shades of that Game 7 against the Lakers in the finals that the Celtics lost. Kendrick Perkins didn't play in that game because he had torn his ACL or whatever like that. And the Celtics in that fourth quarter were up to start and could not grab a rebound to save their lives and lost the game and lost the title. It reminded me of that game. But yeah, there's just so many things that the Celtics did wrong at the end of that game, in a game that they had no business losing. And the only way to describe it is they choked the game away. And Sep, why I'm saying I don't have confidence in them being able to beat Milwaukee twice is because I was listening, because I am clearly a sadist, or masochist, I should say. I was listening to the post-game press conference after it, and they all seemed so shell-shocked. They just did. Tatum, Brown, Smart, Udoka, they all just seem shell-shocked. I don't think that you can translate that to, 48 hours later being able to play a game in a hostile environment against the champs and the best player in the world and beating them on their home court. I don't know how you turn it around that quickly. I think that they still have no idea what happened to them. And what happened to them was they played exactly that fourth quarter, exactly like they played the first 2-3 months of the season, where they thought didn't stink, and they were the best team, and they were, they had an alley-oop that Tatum and Brown, and they were celebrating with the crowd, and they took their foot completely off the gas and let Milwaukee do whatever they wanted in the fourth quarter, couldn't grab a rebound, couldn't score a bucket late, and they let Milwaukee steal a game and potentially steal the series. And Sap, I tweeted this out this morning, that, it is sometimes winning a title or winning a series comes down to a game of inches, and people are still talking about that Kevin Durant foot on the line for the three-pointer last year. Well, Derek White's fingernail was on the ball at the end of the first half, and if he hits that, the Celtics probably win the game if they count that, or if the Celtics can box out, they probably win the game. But a couple of plays make the difference.
Or from a macro level, if they just continue to play in the fourth quarter, we don't even get into the situation where Giannis is taking a free throw to tie the game, misses it, and you can't corral the rebound. And then Bobby Portis, of all people, just lays it in, and now Milwaukee has their first lead since the second quarter. So there's a lot of that. It's tough to read the Celtics sometimes after games. Tatum is so aloof that I can't read if they won or lost. That's just his personality. He's not a very emotional guy. There's good and bad with that. Marcus Smart's an emotional guy. I'm never crazy about the fact that he starts pointing fingers. I mean, he gives you great content, but does he have to call out Al Horford or Jason Tatum for maybe not running the play correctly? That was diagrammed in the huddle.
It's Marcus Smart's fault.
But then Marcus Smart retrieves the ball and decides to go into traffic, and then Drew Holiday makes an all-time great play, right? The block, then the save, then kicks it off of Smart to gain possession. Again, the way I want to compare those two players is Drew Holiday is a poor man's Dennis Johnson, and Marcus Smart's a poor man's Drew Holiday. It's a compliment to all three players. Johnson's in the Hall of Fame. Holiday and Smart won't get to the Hall of Fame, but they're all similar type players. It's just that Holiday's a little more skilled than Marcus Smart, and he came up big in the stretch. I thought through a lot of that game, Marcus Smart had actually outplayed Drew Holiday, but when it counted, Drew Holiday was there to hit a big three, make a couple of big defensive plays. You were able to do that. The Celtics weren't able to do that. I do think they can bounce back, but again, if this thing gets close down the stretch, their confidence is going to be shaken, and the defending champs won't be shaken. And it's not just Giannis, it's other players. Holiday, Portis, Pat Connaughton had a nice game last night. I know we talked about him yesterday. That guy is a really good role player. He's outplaying the Celtics role players. Of course, Grant Williams had that great game too, and since then has been a no-show. I mean, he had 2 rebounds, 1 assist, no points in 32 minutes. What the hell was he doing out there last night besides complaining to the officials? He
looked like Grant Williams from last year. He looked like a guy who shouldn't be in the NBA last night. That's how he played.
Because we compare him to P.J. Tucker. P.J. Tucker doesn't complain to the officials every call out there, right? He just goes and does his job, and he's going to get scored on. If you're guarding Giannis or Kevin Durant, those guys are going to score on you. You got to just put your head down and live to the next play and do a better job. So that's, kind of a turnoff as well. But this is, and you referenced the game 7 of the 2010 finals, and it's an apt comparison because they just could not get a defensive rebound in that game against the Lakers. That was a slog. I think it was 83-78 was the final, something like that. Just Kobe had 14 rebounds that night. He was horrible from the floor, 6 of 24, but still managed 14 rebounds. And Kevin Garnett only had 3 rebounds that night. But is this the worst loss since that loss as a Celtics fan? Because the feeling I get is that there were some tough losses against LeBron, like Game 6 in 2012. And, you can look at losing Game 7 in 2018. But did you really think the Celtics were going to win the title that year, or that they were the better team that lost to LeBron on those 2 occasions? No, I think they're better than Milwaukee. I don't know
too, and it's open for him. That's why it's so. I think that's why you're right, Sepp, and that it is the worst loss, because this is the difference between losing the second round and potentially winning a championship. They have a path to win a championship this year. And because of their own faults and their own mistakes, they could be out in the second round.
Like they were 3 years ago, right? So that was a total cluster bleep, right? 2019 with Kyrie and all that talent not really fulfilling their potential. And they lose in the second round in 5 games to Giannis and the Bucks. Well, if Milwaukee wins Friday night, they get to the second round again and lose in 6 games to Giannis and the Bucks. Even though they had this great second half of the year, it feels like it's wasted because they're not sealing the deal here. And again, we're hearing about, Rob Williams not playing. Milwaukee hasn't had their second best player for the entire series. So let's get off, Rob Williams not being there, being a big detriment to the Celtics. The Celtics, to me, are still better than the Bucks.
I agree.
With current rosters. And they played like that for 38 minutes and then decided in the final 10 minutes, let's take our foot off the gas, not run our offense, and get lackadaisical on defense. And I think it was Keith Smith who tweeted out that he saw 4 times in the fourth quarter that because the Celtics were continually complaining about calls on the offensive end, didn't get back on defense, and Milwaukee was able to drain 4 3-pointers. You can't have that. You've got to finish the game off.
No one to blame but themselves. You don't want to say take away all the credit from Milwaukee because they deserve credit, but this was a self-inflicted loss from the Celtics.
Sure.
Self-inflicted, 100%. I mean, again, this was the same stuff that they were doing early in the season that had me believing that they had no chance of doing anything this season. And it's the worst time to revert to that, but they're not a clutch team and they haven't been for quite some time. Tatum had that buzzer beater and the Nets series in game 1. Like that was a clutch play, but for the most part, South, they're not a clutch team. You pointed out the statistic a couple minutes ago, what they are in close games. And this is what they've been for years now, is that they don't close games out. And that's tough to overcome. Once you overcome it, you overcome it. But to get up to that, up the hill to that point is really hard. And some teams never do it. And man, it's just like to see such a great opportunity squandered is really, for me as a, lifelong diehard Celtics fan, it's just so frustrating. It's like, man, you guys, this team has it. You can do it. And they squandered it. They completely was an all-time choke job in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, it really was. And again, give Milwaukee credit for seizing that opportunity. But if the Celtics had just played solid basketball in the final 10 minutes, they win handily. I mean, I don't think they blow them out by 20 because Milwaukee's a tough team to blow out because they're going to keep fighting because they follow their lead of their best player and the best player in the world in Giannis, who just doesn't give up. I mean, he's getting elbowed by his own teammate, Pat Connaughton, got a cut over his eye, and he's still kind of battling out there. And one thing about Giannis, he hit a big 3 at the end of the third quarter, which kind of cut it to 9, which there's always this psychological thing of going into a quarter down 9 rather than 12.
Yeah,
like there's
definitely
single digit, double digit. And he hit that 3. And again, Stan Van Gundy appropriately saying, why is he taking 3s? Well, he hit that one. And then he hit one in the fourth. He's fearless. He's fearless going to the free throw line. He's not a great free throw shooter. I didn't think he was going to hit both free throws last night, but he did. And that's the most important thing. Missed the second one, but somehow Milwaukee was able to get the rebound and Bobby Portis lays it in. And that's pretty much the game at that point because the Celtics did nothing right from that point forward. And what happened in that situation, Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown are bumping into each other. Again, it felt like an onside kick that went wrong, where you just didn't everything communicated.
It's a good comparison. I think it's a good comparison.
And where is Jason Tatum in that situation? Why isn't Jason Tatum closer to the basket? He's 6'9", 6'10". He's long. Of the guys that are on the court, he's probably your best rebounder because Grant Williams wasn't playing. Why is he nowhere near the rim? Like, I would think that you want to have him closer to the rim to grab the rebound. He's got great hands. I don't know. It's just that
they did everything wrong. Everything wrong. They didn't make a single right decision, whether it was the players, the coaching. They didn't make a right decision at the end of the game.
No, it's frustrating.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly frustrating. I think absolutely the most frustrating loss I can remember, or painful loss I can remember since that Lakers loss. And obviously the Lakers won. It's bigger. It's Game 7 of the NBA Finals, and it's against your arch rivals. So, you can't really compare the two. But this one stings for sure. And it could absolutely be the difference between, I'm looking at the field right now, and I think the Celtics are as good as any team left in the field. And if they get bounced by Miami, you're just going to be left with, man, what if? And that's the worst way to end the season. So we can move on, and we'll talk about them as the series hopefully extends to a game 7. But I don't have any confidence in that right now. And Milwaukee's got all the momentum, and it's very, very hard to try to stave off elimination on the road. And you're in the champs building, and you're playing against the best player in the world. And the Celtics have done this themselves, where they've set themselves up for a very, very hard task to try to salvage this series, which
we saw what
be.
We saw what Giannis did in Game 6 against Phoenix last year. Up 3-2. He went out and had 50 points and 17 of 19 from the free throw line. He smells blood. And I know people don't think he's really a closer because he doesn't have the wide-ranging, all-around offensive game of Kevin Durant, but he has the heart of a lion. And I know it's a cliche, sorry, but he smells blood and he will continue to battle. And that's what makes him the best player in the world, in addition to all that great skill that he has. But I think he smells it at this point and wants to wrap this up Friday night. It's going to take a major effort for the Celtics to win, get off to a good start. And offensively, if you're going to play small, you have to play with force. You have to move your offense. You can't all of a sudden try to drain clock like they did in the fourth quarter. And
like I said, rebounding's about effort.
It is. I mean, Pat Riley, one of the great executives and coaches in the history of the league, no rebounds, no rings. And that was very, very apparent in Game 5.
So we'll move on to the other game last night, in which one of those teams gave up from the tip. Golden State had no interest in being in Memphis or competing in Memphis last night. They lose 95-134. It wasn't that close even. I mean, I don't know why Golden State, did they just want to try to win this on their own home court, or what? They came out with nothing and didn't even attempt to win this game, it seemed like to me.
It was kind of a strange effort, right, by a team that's a veteran-laden team, who, by the way, has lost a 3-1 series lead before, 2016 finals to LeBron and the Cavaliers. So I don't think you want to revisit that, especially if Memphis is able to steal Game 6, and then you've got Game 7 in Memphis. And
I will say this about them, Sep. Golden State, they are arrogant. That might be their downfall. They're a very arrogant team,
to say the least. Yeah, I mean, Steph is likable, but he is very arrogant. Draymond is extremely arrogant. Clay is kind of aloof, kind of like Jason Tatum, but the whole organization does carry itself as an arrogant organization. Look, when you win 3 titles in 4 years, you probably have the right to be that way. But this Memphis team, give them credit. I mean, even without John Morant, they still battle. I mean, they had a real opportunity to win Game 4. Memphis lost 2 really close games in this series. This series could be 3-2 Memphis or even over. I don't sense that, other than Game 3, that Golden State's really dominated this series, right? They won a close game in Game 1, blowout in Game 3, another close game in Game 4 where Memphis kind of gave it away to them. And then in Game 5, here comes Memphis to battle you. So I just think that Memphis is a really tough-minded team, and they're probably one more year away from being a true title contender because they've got to kind of, fix a few things. But they seem to have more balls, heart, and ability to win close games than the Celtics do, right? I mean, I think you just take on the personality of your best player, and even if Ja's not playing, he's a balls to the wall guy, where Jason Tatum is kind of aloof and a great player. Finished 6th in MVP voting, which is a great finish for a young guy in a league with 4 legitimate MVP candidates. I know we're going to talk about that in a few moments, but yeah, I mean, Golden State is very arrogant. They just didn't show up. Did they want another home date to make some money? I mean, they got a high payroll and a beautiful new arena to pay off, so maybe they wanted one more home game, but don't play with fire. I mean, I know Ja's pretty much ruled out of the rest of the playoffs, but what happens if he's feeling up to it in Game 7 and you get there? That place in Memphis is going to be going nuts.
Yeah, I mean, Golden State came into this and just said, whatever, we'll finish this up when we finish it up. So that's really the only thing I can say about that game, is that Golden State had no interest in playing it at all. They might as well have just said, you know what, we'll give them the win. We're not even going to show up. We'll forfeit, and then we'll play the next game in Golden State.
I mean, that's a pretty, about a 3.5-hour flight from San Francisco to Memphis?
I don't know. Yeah, it's not a short flight.
Not short, no.
But no, they're an arrogant team. They're definitely a front running team too. When things are going well, they're big, celebrating and dancing and stuff like that. And then when they're behind, they kind of call it quits. But hey, they've won 3 titles, like you said, Sap. So, they get the right to be whatever they want to be. But yeah, I mean, that was just embarrassing effort from them last night. 2 embarrassing efforts in the other 2 series that we haven't talked about in their last games. Miami blew out Philadelphia and Phoenix blew out Dallas. They play again tonight. Both Phoenix and Miami have the chance to wrap up the series, but both of them would have to do so on the road. Sap, do you think either of these series end tonight?
I do. I mean, I still think that Phoenix seems to win every series or get involved in every series they're in, go 6 games, right? Whether it's New Orleans in round 1 this year, or the Lakers in round 1 last year, or the finals against Milwaukee last year, or the conference finals against the Clippers. Phoenix is always playing 6-game series. I expect them to wrap it up tonight. I think it's going to be a kind of game where Chris Paul just goes off. I think he struggled in games 3 and 4 in Dallas. And I think he's going to go off tonight and they'll wrap it up. And I do think Miami will win tonight because I think at this point that Embiid is just gassed. I mean, dealing with the broken, fractured face, essentially. Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't even, it's the orbital bone. It feels like his entire face is fractured. The ligament in the thumb and, Harden looks like he's gassed. And I think in the rumors of Doc may be the Lakers' next head coach or whatever. So I think both road teams wrap this up tonight. The 2 number 1 seeds take advantage of a good opportunity and get a head start on getting ready for the conference finals.
I certainly think Phoenix will wrap it up because I think I've said all along, I think Dallas's roster sucks, outside of Luka, obviously. And that Phoenix, I think, was pissed off with what happened in Dallas. And you saw that the last game. So I think Phoenix will wrap it up. I don't know what to make of Philadelphia. I just don't know what to make of them. I didn't think they were going to get blown out in game 5. And they did. So, geez, I think I could see them winning. I could see them getting killed. I could see it being a close. I don't know, Sap. I really don't know. I will go with the most recent data, which is them playing like crap. So I'll agree with you and say Miami wins. But I honestly can't make heads or tails of this 76ers team.
No, because they still have elite talent, right? I mean, Embiid's capable of going for 30 and 15. Harden has had one really good game in this series. Tobias Harris has had a really good game in this series. And Tyrese Maxey's probably been the most consistent player for Philadelphia in this series. I mean, if they all go off in one night, they can beat anybody. But, again, with the Embiid injuries and Harden's lack of conditioning and not a very deep bench, and you kind of get the feeling if they get down early, they'll throw in the white towel. I don't picture Philadelphia being like Milwaukee that's just built differently. I picture Philadelphia at times maybe just saying, it's not meant to be. Let's move on. So I think Miami, which isn't built that way, they'll battle you to the end. I think they can pull it off. And again, who the hell wants to go to Game 7? It's not something that's an easy task. Although in the NBA, generally the home team wins Game 7, but you don't want to take that chance if you have an opportunity to wrap this thing up on the road.
Yeah. All right. We're going to go rapid fire now to end the show, Sap, with just a couple more topics and questions. We talked about this the other day, but Nikola Jokic officially named as the NBA MVP, and they released all the voting data from the writers. It actually was not as close as I thought it was going to be. Jokic finishes with 875 total points, and the next closest was Embiid with 706. Giannis finishes in third with 595. That was as we expected, those first 3. A little bit of a surprise. 4th place is Devin Booker. 5th place is Luka Doncic, then Jason Tatum, then Ja Morant, then Steph Curry, then Chris Paul, then DeMar DeRozan, then LeBron James, then Kevin Durant amounted for all the guys who did get votes. You vote for 1 through 5th place for this, Sap. Any big things stand out to you here?
Yeah, I was surprised Booker finished ahead of Luka, but I mean, that's not an egregious error because Phoenix did have the best record by a sizable margin, right? They had 64 wins. The next best record was Memphis with 56. So you got to give some love to Phoenix. And I would give it to Booker over Chris Paul because he played more during the season. Chris Paul got hurt at the All-Star game and missed, about 6 weeks. So I think that was a somewhat of a surprise, but it's not that bad. I thought it would be closer at the top. At least I felt it should have been closer at the top. But from all the data we were getting from people that declared who they voted for, you knew that Jokic was going to win. I didn't think he was going to win by that wide a margin. Kind of reminded me of a couple of years ago when Giannis and LeBron were the clear two favorites to win the award. I thought LeBron should have won it, or at least been closer. I think Giannis got 81 first place votes to LeBron's 19. That doesn't seem fair. We saw that in the NFL MVP voting last year when I felt Aaron Rodgers deserved it over Tom Brady, but not by a 2-1 margin. Sometimes, as I've said before, and we both discussed this before, I get the feeling that some people vote for who they think is going to win, not who deserves to win, which is kind of silly, right? It's like, well, he's going to win, so let me vote for him because I want to pick the winner. Well, that's not your job. You vote for who you think the MVP is, not who you think is going to win it. So I would have voted for Giannis. I think you felt the same way, but Jokic wins a second MVP. And, I think he's headed for the Hall of Fame at this point. The only MVP in the history of the league who I don't think will make the Hall of Fame is Derrick Rose because of the injuries.
No, he's won.
Already in.
Jokic just won 2. He could retire tomorrow. He could retire tomorrow. He's in.
Yeah, he's in. Whereas Derrick Rose won 1, and then after that, the injuries kicked in, and he became somewhat of a role player and a damn good one. But he's not going to make the Hall of Fame. Nash has 2, which we can argue if he deserved them. I think Jokic, you can make a case for Embiid winning it last year and Giannis winning it this year. But the people that really get into the analytics of basketball love Jokic. He just puts up incredible numbers. Look, a guy who averaged 13 plus rebounds, also averaged 8.5 assists. That's nuts from a center position, although he's kind of a point center at this point, right? I mean, positionless basketball. So look, I said it a million times. I thought there were 4 deserving MVP candidates this year: Jokic, Embiid, Giannis, and Luka. And, they gave it to Jokic.
Yeah. My quick thoughts on it were set, but I tweeted this out too. Like I said, surprised that he won by as much of a margin. I thought DeRozan deserved a little bit more love. He finished in 7th place, I think. No, lower than that. And I felt that Kevin Durant, LeBron, and Ja didn't play enough games to warrant an MVP vote. Just my opinion. Didn't think that. I think you need to play enough. You need to qualify with amount of games played.
Right.
And LeBron's team didn't even make the playoffs. So
no, but he's LeBron. It's like let's not bash LeBron. I mean, he's okay.
I'm mad about the Celtics, Sep. I gotta take my anger.
I know. Take it on poor LeBron, who apparently is going to get traded by Phil Jackson at some point.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to move on to that rapid fire, Sep. That's a report out there that Phil Jackson would prefer to trade LeBron James and keep Russell Westbrook as opposed to vice versa. I have a hard time believing that's true, but that's the rumor out there.
Oh no, I believe it. Phil Jackson hates LeBron James. I mean, and LeBron James hates Phil Jackson, and I think Phil Jackson is such a fan of Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant that the comparisons are there, that he just hates LeBron James. And he's in the ear of Jeannie Buss, who they had a romantic relationship a decade ago, and they remain friends. And the Lakers, who are run like a mom and pop organization and have way too many people involved in Jeannie Buss's ear. And now Phil Jackson is kind of the consigliere there. And Phil Jackson did win 11 championships as a head coach. Fortunately for him, he got to coach Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen for 6 of them, Shaq and Kobe for 3, and then Kobe for 2 more. What the hell does he know about team building? I mean, he ran the Knicks for 4 years. They were god-awful. What does he know about picking a coach?
Nothing.
Derek Fisher and Kurt Rambis were the coaches at the Knicks. Like, could you get any worse than that? So now he's going to be involved with the Lakers. Should the Lakers trade LeBron James? I mean, you could look into it. He's going to be 38 in December. Are you going to be able to put people around him to contend? That's going to be difficult. But to say I'd trade LeBron James and keep Russell Westbrook is insane. The only thing is,
to what end? To
right.
The end that you like the guy on the team better, because it's not to the end to trying to win a championship sooner.
No, it's just you hate LeBron James, and maybe you like Russell Westbrook because he looks like he's playing his ass off, which at times he does on offense, but not on defense. And what are you going to do? Give Westbrook an extension? He's got 1 year left. You can't wait to get rid of him. But as a LeBron guy, I wouldn't mind if they traded him. He's had his 4 years in LA. He brought them a championship, which was the goal. Should have been a little bit better. They, missed the playoffs twice and lost in the first round the other year. Where would he go? What would teams give up for LeBron James? I think they would give up something substantial because I think he still has 3 years left.
How many teams would he accept the trade to? Because he's got no
Exactly.
trade clause. So
Right. And does he want to leave LA? He moved to LA, yes, to play for the Lakers, the legacy franchise, to win. Okay, mission accomplished somewhat because they did win a title. But he also moved there for other reasons, for business, for lifestyle, for the family. Is he gonna, again, LeBron James could still live in LA and then play somewhere else and travel when necessary. I mean, these guys have private jets at their disposal.
I think there's only two places he would consider being traded to: the Heat and the Cavs. I think that's it.
Go back to where he's played before.
Yep,
well, there'd be some symmetry there, wouldn't there, if he went back to Miami? Because you go Cleveland, Miami, Cleveland, LA.
But I don't know that. I don't even know that he'd want to go back to Miami because he's different than he was when he was there. I think he enjoyed Miami as a younger guy, and his kids were really young and stuff like that. Like, I don't think the trappings of Miami, I don't think appeal to him as much anymore. That's a guess.
Yeah, he's probably in bed early at night, like the rest of us old guys. But what was the relationship with Pat Riley when he left? I know Pat Riley
not good.
He left. Pat Riley runs that organization. That's one of the organizations that if LeBron goes there, he's not going to trample the front office, right?
Right, and they don't feel like they need him right now, Miami, I don't think.
Right, and what would you have to give up to get him? Tyler Hero would be the first name that would pop up. Butler and Lowry are older, and you kind of want to put LeBron with those guys and make a run at a championship. As far as Cleveland, I mean, they've got a really nice future there. Colin Sexton might be on the move, because Darius Garland is as good, if not better than Colin Sexton. So is it Colin Sexton, some draft capital? What exactly would the Lakers get in return? The Lakers are built on stars. I mean, that's always been the case, and you're trading still the biggest star in the sport. And what do you get back in return?
What they might need to do, Sep, is fire Jeannie Buss because she's listening to really, really bad advice from people. She's listening to Phil Jackson and Kurt Rambis and Linda Rambis. I mean, these people have no success in putting together basketball teams. Rob Pelinka he's basically just been along for the ride. They need to bring in somebody who knows anything about building a team. Who would be great at it is Jerry West, but they've completely alienated him. So
let's alienate, you had at one point Jerry West and Pat Riley in the organization, right? Who are both pretty prominent still at an advanced age, and they're long since been gone from there. You screwed up, and you bring in, again, I called it a mom and pop organization. They kind of run like the Dallas Cowboys. They have this enormous brand, and Jerry Jones kind of runs it like a mom and pop organization. I mean, he's the GM, the son's involved, the daughter's involved, the other son's
involved.
He's
doing all the radio hits, right?
Yeah, he's got the draft board ready, and he's showing everybody how proud he is of it. It's kind of run the same way. They make a ton of money in spite of themselves because Jeannie Buss and Jerry Jones are very good at marketing. They understand the business side of it, but stay out of personnel.
But here's the thing too, Sap, is that when she came in too, she got, basically stabbed her brother or brothers in the back, ousted them, fired them. Yeah. It was like, I'm great at this. I'm going to fix the Lakers. And then she doesn't really fix the Lakers. LeBron just chose to come there. It wasn't anything that she did. But she acts like she's this, basketball genius. And her brothers were so incompetent. She's equally as incompetent as her brothers.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too, over the last 10 years, other than the bubble championship, they've been arguably the worst team in basketball. I mean, Kobe's last 3 years were a disaster. They averaged 22 wins per year. Then they were really irrelevant.
Conveniently gloss over that.
Right. I mean, if LeBron's last 3 years were 22 wins a year, I wouldn't hear the end of it. But Kobe, who was more beloved than LeBron, especially in LA. I mean, we could have an entire podcast to debate who was the most beloved Laker. It's only two guys. Well, three. In the history of that franchise, to me, it's West, Magic, Kobe. The discussion starts. Now, West only won one championship as a player, but, he was a great executive, and the man is the damn.
Basketball wasn't as popular when he was playing. That's a thing. It's so it's Kobe and Magic, in my opinion.
That's it. And I almost get the sense. That it's more Kobe than Magic. But that'll be a good summer podcast, Jet. When the season's over, we can talk about who is Mr. Laker. Is it Magic or is it Kobe? It's one of those two, with Jerry West winning the bronze medal. But Jeannie Buss, very successful business-wise. I mean, she was given the team, so it's not like she bought the team. That's always a good place to be in. But really, what are they going to do next? The smart people would be, let me get on the phone to Toronto and see if Masai Ujiri can come here and run things and get out of his way. But they're not going to do that, and he's not going to do that. So there's a lot of issues they have. But now you got Phil Jackson involved, Magic's back involved, Rob Pelinka, you got Linda Rambis, Kurt Rambis, and the rest of the Rambises. It's not very good.
They'd be better off talking to anybody besides who they're talking to right now. Phil Jackson put together a last place team. Kurt Rambis and Linda Rambis have no clue what they're doing.
Right. Yeah. And Rob Pelinka, when he made some good moves to help them win the championship. I mean, he executed the Anthony Davis trade. That's great. But they gave up a lot.
Do that. Anthony Davis forced himself to LA, right. And Rob Pelinka happened to be the guy in the driver's seat at the time.
I mean, it's not, although I will say they drafted pretty well for a while. Although, they took Lonzo Ball instead of Jason Tatum. I mean, picture Jason Tatum playing with LeBron. That would be damn scary. Yep. Brandon Ingram, I thought, was a good choice. Jaylen Brown's probably a slightly better player than Brandon Ingram, but Brandon Ingram was
close enough.
Julius Randle was a good pick at number 7. Even D'Angelo Russell was pretty darn good at number 2. They drafted pretty well. When they brought LeBron in, it was like, we got to blow this thing up.
They did not develop those guys well, though.
No.
They all struggled mightily on the Lakers.
Yeah. It's a tough place to play. Again, LeBron, who I think is the greatest player ever, goes there with immense pressure. He's not even, I don't think he's, okay, he delivered a championship, but Laker fans don't like him in a sense. If you did a real lie detector test, they don't like him because for the 15 years they battled against him because people
he's a mercenary.
Well, not that, but for how many years was it Laker fans saying, "Oh, Kobe's better than LeBron," which to me is a ridiculous argument. I mean, Kobe Bryant, I think, is the 9th greatest player in the history of the sport. That's pretty good. I just think LeBron's the greatest player in the history of the sport. But Laker fans hate LeBron. I mean, I think Laker fans, until he signed there, hated LeBron even more than Celtics fans in some sense, right? Because Celtic fans, after a while, you kind of did respect the guy. I mean, he beat you 5 straight times in the postseason. You realize how great he is. But the Laker fans would always push back and say, no, Kobe's greater, which I don't think is the case. And then he signs.
Celtics fans couldn't realistically say Paul Pierce is better than LeBron.
No. Well,
I would love to.
I will attest to this. I mean, I'm much older than you, but my first column at the Boston Herald was LeBron James is greater than Larry Bird. And I wrote that in the fall of 2014. So LeBron had won only 2 titles at that point. The looks I got when I walked into the newsroom that day, man, if looks could kill, I'd be dead.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned Larry Bird, Sap, because I do want to transition to our next. We're supposed to have this be lightning round. We're not very good at that.
No, we're not good at it. It's more like slow rumbles instead of lightning.
Larry Bird is going to be the namesake of a new trophy, as is Magic Johnson. The NBA announced today that the MVPs of the respective conference finals will be named the Larry Bird. I guess it'll be the Larry Bird Trophy for the MVP of the Eastern Conference, Magic Johnson Trophy for the MVP of the Western Conference finals. And then they also announced the trophies for winning that conference is going to be the Bob Cousy Trophy for winning the Eastern Conference and the Oscar Robertson Trophy for winning the Western Conference. So, Sap, good idea, bad idea? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you care?
Well, I mean, we're doing an NBA podcast, so we've got to have some opinion on this. I can't just say I don't care. That's not good radio, right? So I got to have some sort of opinion on this. No, it's great honoring Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, 2 guys who helped save basketball when they came into the league together in 1979. I'm sure Michael Jordan is somewhat furious, right? Because there's no trophy named after him. Although we did agree that if they were to change the logo, which Jerry West is fine with. Jerry West has said, I don't need to be the logo, that probably Jordan would be the logo. I thought it would be the Jordan or Bill Russell would be.
Yeah, but Jerry West has never charged them a cent for it, and Michael Jordan would charge them up the wazoo for it. Is the problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, as with Tom Brady, if he became the logo of the
NFL.
That's
true.
Jordan and Tom Brady very much cut from the same cloth. Yeah, it's fine because, again, Bird and Magic were so instrumental in this sport becoming so popular. That's fine. As far as winning the conferences, Cousy and Oscar Robertson, I guess that's fine too, except
they were both presidents of the Players Association. They said that's part of it.
That's a good move. Yeah, and they're all-time great players, so I got no problem with that too. I think Oscar's the 2nd greatest point guard ever, behind only Magic, slightly ahead of Steph, if we call Steph a point guard. And Cousy, I think people don't realize that Cousy was a guy who was 6'1" with enormous hands.
Yeah, JJ Redick hates Bob Cousy.
Yes, doesn't want to hear anything about Bob Cousy or all the old-time great players or anybody that likes them. That's another podcast. We're setting up a lot of good podcasts. We got to talk about JJ Redick. Maybe we'll get JJ on to, talk about basketball.
Sure.
Love to. Absolutely. Him and Rex Chapman. Love them both, actually. But I'm trying to think who else you could have done this for. Do you do it for someone who's that old? I mean, I don't want to sound morbid here.
He's still alive. They're both
still alive. Yeah. I mean, do you do it? You're not going to give Tim Duncan an award because what about Kobe Bryant? Well, Kobe Bryant, isn't he the All-Star game?
The All-Star game MVP.
Okay. Yep. And Bill Russell is the Finals MVP award.
Yeah.
So that's good. I'm trying to think of other greats that there's
Kareem
nothing.
Kareem is the one that's lacking, I guess.
Yeah, Kareem. Maybe you give Kareem.
That should be like the award.
It is the humanitarian award, right?
It is. I was gonna say because the Walter Payton is probably the equivalent of what the Kareem should be. So you're right. He is.
Remember we did that last year, so that's fine.
That's right.
And I think Kareem probably appreciates that more than winning the conference. Why not LeBron James? He won the conference 8 straight times.
Man, they're not going to do it for an active player, Sap. I'm sorry.
But no, Kuzi and Oscar are great.
But here we go, Sap. I like this. So we've got the Bill Russell Trophy, the Bob Cousy Trophy, and the Larry Bird Trophy. 3 Celtics, and the Lakers. Yes. The Lakers have the Magic Johnson Trophy, the Kobe Bryant All-Star Game one, and the humanitarian. So they get 3 also.
That's good. That's good. And Michael Jordan's furious.
Yeah, whatever.
He's okay. He's just fine. He's on a golf course somewhere, stiffing someone.
Yeah. So the last topic, Sap, of our rapid fire, not really rapid fire, is actually a sad topic that we're going to end with is that Bob Lanier, former Piston and Buck, passed away from cancer at 73. Sap, you have told me that you had talked to Bob Lanier in the past, interviewed him. Sure. And people seem to only have nice things to say about him, as he was not only a great basketball player, but a humanitarian as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was drafted by Detroit in 1970 with the first overall pick. He played at St. Bonaventure for 4 years. I mean, just think about a player of that caliber.
Basketball powerhouse. Yeah.
4 years in college at St. Bonaventure, but he wanted to stay close to home in Buffalo. Hurt his knee early in the tournament in 1970 or just before the tournament. And he just had a myriad of knee operations to the point where I remember going in the locker room and you'd see him sitting there with ice all over himself because, he was just so beat up at that point that his knees, looked like the stitches on a baseball. Like he had so many operations that he could barely move, and to get ready to play was a chore. And he retired, I believe, at about 36 years old after the 84 season. He got traded to Milwaukee in 1980, and he was going to be the missing piece to get them over the top, but it just never happened because his first year they were in the Western Conference and they lost a really tough 7-game series to the defending champion Supersonics. And then the next year they moved Milwaukee from the West to the East, and Milwaukee was always the second or third best team in the East because the Celtics and 76ers were just a little bit better, a little bit better. And he lost twice in the conference finals in 83 to the 76ers, who were a juggernaut, and then in 84 to the Celtics, who were also a juggernaut. He'd been the president of the Players Association. If you saw him, he was this big, intimidating guy, but he was, really, approachable and a really good interview. And, he's legendary for having what people thought were the largest sneakers in the history of the NBA. He wore Converse, and if you'd ever gone to the Converse outlet, they'd always had these huge sneakers of Bob Lanier. They said they were size 22 and a halves, which wasn't true. That was the Australian size, but they were 19 and a halves, which is obviously an enormous foot.
Large sneaker, yes.
That's a large sneaker. You could fit a small family in there, and just
it's over 10 sizes bigger than my sneaker.
Right? Yeah, it's like 2 of your sneakers, which is pretty big. But an interesting story was the Bucks, and that was my team in the early '80s because Marcus Johnson was my favorite player. I loved Lanier, Sidney Moncrief. That was my team. They couldn't break through, but Alton Lister was drafted in the first round in 1982 or 1983. So he played 1 or 2 years with Bob Lanier. He was a big center from Arizona. He was a good defender, rebounder. And before a game one time, this is a story that came out, that he was sitting at his locker and said, "Damn, I forgot my sneakers." And he was a rookie. He turned to Bob Lanier and says, "Hey, Bob, you got an extra pair of sneakers that I can wear?" And the whole locker room just started laughing like, you are aware that his sneakers are enormous. Well, apparently Lanier, as a joke, gave him the sneakers, and they fit because Alton Lister also had huge feet. So it worked out pretty well for him. But Lanier was a class act. Again, president of the Players Association, global ambassador, beloved in Detroit. I mean, he was just a guy who was constantly helping out in the community. And, again, long gone at a very, very young age, and may he rest in peace. But he's in the Hall of Fame. Didn't make the NBA 75th anniversary team. He was one of about 10 players I thought you could have had in there in place of others. But again, that list seemed to be a little biased to the modern players.
Yeah.
And forgot guys who never won a championship. Heck, Bob Lanier didn't even play in a championship, but he was a great player and a great ambassador for the sport, and a wonderful human being.
Yeah, Anthony Davis is really working his way of getting removed from that list as soon as possible.
Yeah, which will never happen, right? Once you're on there, they're not going to take you off.
Can't take you off.
But yeah, same thing. I don't think Dame Lillard belongs on there, but whatever.
Yeah, same. I agree. All right. So rest in peace to Bob Lanier, without a doubt. Definitely one of the greats. Tremendous statistics in his career too. Averaged 20 and 10, which is fantastic over the course of a career to be able to do that. And so our well wishes to his friends and family. And that's going to do it for us, Sap. We didn't necessarily nail the lightning round like a fast round, but we got to all of our topics. And talking about the Celtics being so bad in the fourth quarter made me feel a little bit better. It was cathartic.
Okay.
Hopefully they can shock me, Sap, and win in Milwaukee. But we will be talking about it either way. We'll either be giving them a postmortem or a preview of Game 7. So make sure you stick ahead for that, and make sure you check out our social medias at JohnSap25, at Jet Stryer. You can find the show wherever podcasts are found. Just type in the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, or find it on YouTube at youtube.com/Jet Stryer. And we will talk to you later, everybody. Thanks for listening. See ya.